An Albany woman feared for her life months before dying from a gunshot wound to the head.
Shocking new details revealing the horrifying events leading up to the deadly Christmas Day shooting of Sky Lemmons-Dixon.
She reported what was happening to her. She was ready to testify, and still somehow she ended up dead.
It is overwhelming to me, Mr. Ketter, the level of evil that you carried out on both of these women.
And every time she would talk about him, it was just worse than the last thing. She was just scared of him, so scared.
Relationship, including burning her with a pot, breaking her arm, trying to set her on fire, and asking her how she wanted to die.
Some stories in life tell of persons who endured hardships and suffered throughout their younger years, only to rise through it all and become a light that overcame their dark past. 23-year-old Sky Lemmons-Dixon was one of those persons. She was a beautiful young woman on the verge of finding her way out of her troubled past and the hands of an abuser, whose beatings to the brink of death instilled fear in her heart. But her life met a tragic end before she could be free. The beginning event that led to her brutal end began in 2022, when she entered into a romantic relationship with a man by the name of Houston Ketter III, also known as JD. From a Facebook post made by Sky, it quickly became evident that the relationship she entered into was one detrimental to her life. Not long after that post on the same day, Sky again expressed displeasure with her partner and the hate she held for her miserable life. It became clear that something was dangerously wrong, and whatever she was enduring behind closed doors was harmful to her mental health. Soon, it was discovered to be far, far worse than just that. Many would ask the question, why not just leave if you're unhappy? But in Sky's case, that decision came with grave consequences. See, Ketter was no regular abuser. His mind was as twisted as they come, and his heart was like it never existed in the first place. He instilled a fear in Sky that was an understandable emotion given the details of what he was doing to her. Court documents would later reveal that throughout their relationship, her injuries sustained at his hands were extensive and frightening.
According to court filings, the 23-year-old was in an abusive relationship with 41-year-old Houston Ketter III, claiming he tortured her over their 4-month relationship, including burning her with a pot, breaking her arm, trying to set her on fire, and asking her how she wanted to die.
Sky's life was in jeopardy, so much so that she'd confide in one of her best friends about how fearful she was of him, even to the point of hiding when he came to her apartment unannounced.
She FaceTimed me a few times to tell me about him. And every time she would talk about him, it was just worse than the last thing. She was just scared of him, so scared. He would come in the apartment and she would be on the phone and she would just hide it or throw her phone across the room so he didn't know.
How cowardly for a man to prey on a woman as he did. Worst yet, a 41-year-old man to a 23-year-old woman. Sky Lemmons, even though terrified to her core, gathered the strength to leave the relationship after 4 months as she aspired to be so much more in life. She went a step further and summoned the courage to stand up to her abuser by cooperating with law enforcement in a criminal case against him. The case involved another woman who made it evident Ketter took pleasure in harming women. His previous victim, Cre8live, experienced excruciating pain at his hands in November 2022. He sought to take her life by setting her ablaze and laughed in amusement as her screams could be heard over the sizzling of skin as the fire engulfed her. The victim's excruciating experience was captured on the body camera footage of an Albany police officer who happened to be passing the scene at the time. It's reported that the footage holds images of the traumatizing scenario, her piercing screams, and the frantic rush by police and others to extinguish the flames, which ultimately saved her life. Reports by the Times-Union, who first discovered the case, state that Ketter, who was a known drug dealer, lit her on fire to make an example out of her because she owed him money for drugs. Ketter was apprehended by cops and held without bail pending his trial. His charges included attempted first-degree murder and multiple felony counts of assault. At this point, he was unaware of Sky's cooperation with the cops, and they tried their best to keep it that way. Court documents show a protective order was in effect, which kept Keter from knowing any details about witnesses scheduled to testify against him in his October 2023 trial.
There was a protective order which remained in effect until October 2nd, 2023. I'll tell you why that date is important in a second. The protective order prevented Houston Kettle from having any evidence whatsoever of Sky Lemmons-Dixon's cooperation with the prosecution in the case.
This gave Sky an illusion of protection because the flaw in the protective order was that it ended on October the 2nd, 2023. 2 weeks before Keter's trial, when she was scheduled to testify against her ex-boyfriend. Sky wasn't naive to the evil reaches of the man who nearly took her life. Confiding in a crime victim advocate, she expressed how terrified she was of testifying in court and believed her life would be in danger if she did. Those fears would stand before her soon after.
Lemmons-Dixon previously told a crime victim advocate she was terrified that if she testified at his trial, her life would be in danger.
On October 14th, just short of the 2-week date for the trial, Sky Lemmons-Dixon vanished. Given her fears expressed before about testifying, one could assume that she chose to disappear before the trial so she wouldn't have to testify. But there was one other possible reason she went missing. Someone kidnapped her, or worse yet, murdered her, so she couldn't testify. Evidence would soon hint towards the latter being at play. That same day she went missing, prosecutors later state Keter was caught on a recorded jail call to someone discussing keeping track of someone else. Later the same day, surveillance video captured Sky walking with a man who, while holding her arm, placed her into a Kia Soul. The vehicle was tracked en route to New York City. Was it a friend helping with her escape, or a foe forcing her out of the picture? Later that night, a jail phone call recorded from Keter would answer that question for authorities. It was a phone call to Sky Lemmons. On the call, Keter could be heard telling her to get low and be safe, a code prosecutors interpreted as him being responsible for her disappearance.
The documents I got today state that on October 14th, after the protective order ended, Kettle made a phone call, and Lemmons-Dixon, known as SLD in the documents, picked up the line and spoke with Kettle. He stated, "Get low and be safe." The court papers state, though Kettle attempted to speak in code during his jail calls generally, it is apparent that he was telling SLD to stay under the radar. This is simply an example of the Kettle exerting his control over SLD.
In another recorded jail call on October 15th, Keter asked a person to Google what happens if a witness or a victim does not appear at trial.
Court documents show while in jail on a recorded phone call, Keter asked someone to Google what happens if a witness or a victim does not appear at trial.
This posed a major problem to the case, with one witness no longer able to testify. According to the Times-Union, it was reported that in a hearing, prosecutors said Keter's family, at his direction, essentially hid Sky Lemmons-Dixon. It was also exposed that recordings at the Albany County Jail showed Keter spoke to his uncle James Simmons earlier that month, repeatedly referring to the ex-girlfriend by a code name. In his defense, Keter's attorney tried to argue that prosecutors showed no wrongdoing by his client. He said it was not misconduct by Keter to speak to his uncle or former girlfriend. However, given the surveillance footage and recorded jail calls, Albany County Judge Andra Ackerman determined that Keter had been responsible for the young woman's absence from the trial and allowed prosecutors to read her grand jury testimony as evidence. Keter entered court in his yellow prison jumpsuit, sitting nonchalantly as witness and victim. Carrie Rouse recalls the traumatizing agony she endured and the countless surgeries needed to bring her back to life after his attack.
Keter tried to kill a woman by setting her on fire. It happened last November in Albany. That woman, Carrie Rouse, bravely spoke in court today. She talked about remembering screaming for someone to put the flames out.
Houston Keter III set me on fire and found humor in it. I have no hair on the back of my head. I have third-degree burns on 30% of my body. I cannot realistically tell you how many surgeries, blood transfusions, Days and nights of horror I've overcome.
Court documents reveal Sky's accounts of what she endured, and it's truly unbelievable what this sorry excuse of a man found pleasure in doing. On more than one occasion during their 4-month relationship, he poured lighter fluid on Sky's head, drenching her face, then proceeded to throw a lit blunt on her. However, when the blunt went out before it hit her, he then grabbed 2 lighters and clicked them together in another attempt to set her on fire. On another occasion, he heated a pot for about an hour, then placed the pot on Sky's arm, in between her legs and on her side, and on her buttocks. Once the pot was no longer hot, he used the same pot to break her arm. Houston Ketter was as sick as they come. This realization was clear to the jurors, who deliberated less than 3 hours before convicting Ketter of attempted first-degree murder and felony assault. Prosecutors requested the maximum sentence, and the judge obliged, sentencing him to 50 years to life in prison on December 19, 2023.
A man who set a woman on fire to try to kill her and attacked another person got the maximum sentence in Albany County Court today.
Houston Ketter III will go to prison for 50 years to life.
It is overwhelming to me, Mr. Ketter, the level of evil that you carried out on both of these women.
The trial and sentencing came and went, but still, there was no sign of Sky. The worry was that since Ketter was sentenced and off to jail, he no longer had anything to lose. With Sky's testimony still being used to help in attaining that outcome, Ketter might want revenge. Fingers were crossed in hopes of her being found alive. 5 days would pass, and Christmas Day was on the horizon. On Christmas morning, a certain chill was in the air, not in terms of being cold, but ominous. Soon, it would be known why. Sky Lemmons-Dixon was found with a bullet wound to her head at a residence on the 700 block of State Street. Still alive, there was a glimmer of hope for her survival. She was rushed to the Albany Medical Center Hospital in critical condition, where surgery to save her life began. A user on Reddit claiming to be her best friend commented that Sky called her 3 times early Christmas morning before she was shot. Due to how tired she was, she missed the calls. I only hope the regret she feels is replaced with the good memories she held of her friend and the moments they held dear, as no fault falls on her for what happened. Sky survived the first day in hospital, and while she continued to hang on, she sadly succumbed to her injuries a week later.
We begin with breaking news at 5. The woman who was shot in the head in Albany on Christmas Day has died from her injuries.
Albany police identifying the victim as 23-year-old Sky Lemmons-Dixon. She was shot in the 700 block of State Street, taken to Albany Med. She had been in critical condition until she passed. Police are still looking for suspects.
On January 17, 2024, the Albany Police Chief Eric Hawkins released a statement on the apprehension of a 36-year-old suspect named Michael Varlach. He pleaded not guilty to murder and criminal possession of a weapon and will have to face the law, which will hopefully find the truth.
First, and all new here at 5, an arrest made in a shocking Christmas morning homicide in Albany.
23-year-old Sky Lemmons-Dixon was shot in the head, dying just days later, and now Michael Varlach of Albany pleading not guilty to murder and gun charges today. Prosecutors say he used an illegal gun. Varlach will remain in custody.
According to Times Union, Sky's upbringing had been turbulent after her mother, a psychiatrist, died when Sky was just 11. Her teenage years saw struggles with emotional issues and hardships, but Sky was determined to live a better life. After going to school in New York City, she began attending the Charlton School in Burnt Hills, a non-profit mental health care center and high school for troubled young women. Sky was advancing so well that she was interviewed in 2018 by News 13 for a special segment, and her confidence shone as she spoke.
In 2018, Sky Lemmons-Dixon shared these powerful words with us while she was a student at the Charlton School in Burnt Hills, a school for troubled teenage girls.
It's never a wrong thing to say what you believe in, and that's always the thing that I will carry on after leaving here.
Even through her rough life, her heart was still beating with kindness and compassion, not only for those around her, but her love for animals showed a young woman who was gentle and caring.
She says Lemmons-Dixon adored animals and even worked at a vet center at one point.
Animals just want love and to be cared for, and I think she very much felt that. Like, this girl worked at an animal hospital, and she knew all of their names, the medications that they took, their ages, the owners. Like, we stayed over at her apartment a few times when she was living at the vet center she worked at. She would like bring us down, give us a tour like they were her kids.
Condolences outpoured from those who knew her and those who saw her growing potential as she rose through adversity.
Right next to Lemmons-Dixon in that class was one of her best friends, Ariella Mendez.
She had the biggest heart, and it didn't matter like what was going on in her life at the time. She always made sure to make her friends know how much she cared about them and loved them. Literally the most beautiful person, like inside and out. And she just had so much life left to live and so many things to accomplish. The best person, no matter what situation, circumstance she was stuck in, she was always just looking for better opportunities for herself and her friends. She was just the best.
It's sad her life was taken so tragically. So many endure the same abuse as her behind closed doors, unable to be free. Sky was outspoken about her struggle, but was it the law that failed her in the end? I can only wish that her life inspires change that will better protect abuse victims and create a safe space for them to confide in and live freely. For more true crime documentaries, check out one of the videos on the screen. This has been an episode of Mystories, where true stories from around the world come to life. What stories come next? Like, share, comment, and subscribe to never miss what intriguing chronicles will be told.